Chosen one. You know that person who made you feel like you were asking for too much when all you wanted was basic respect? The one who had you questioning your own reality, wondering if you were being too sensitive or expecting too much from people? Well, chosen one, what happened to them after they threw you away wasn't just karma. It was a complete systematic destruction so devastating that people who knew them before are genuinely shocked by what they've become. They had no idea they were betraying someone hand-picked by God as their greatest blessing. And what you're about to discover about your true power is going to change how you see yourself forever. Let me start with something that's going to hit close to home. You were the person who remembered their important dates when everyone else forgot. You celebrated their wins like they were your own. You defended them when other people pointed out their obvious red flags. You made excuses for behavior that made you uncomfortable because you believed in their potential. What you didn't realize, and what they definitely couldn't see, was that you weren't just being a good person. You were operating as their personal life support system. Think about this timeline carefully, because this is where it gets really interesting. While you were actively involved in their life, everything seemed to work out for them in ways that, honestly, didn't make much sense, given their actual effort and character. They kept getting second chances at work, despite showing up late and having attitude problems. That promotion they barely deserved somehow landed in their lap. The apartment they wanted accepted their application, even though 3 other people had better credit scores. Their car kept running despite them never doing maintenance. Their health issues mysteriously resolved themselves. Even their dating life was better. They attracted people who were way out of their league. You probably attributed it to their charm or luck. They definitely took credit for all of it. But something else was happening behind the scenes that neither of you understood at the time. Your genuine care, your prayers, your positive intentions for their well-being were creating an invisible shield around their life. When you worried about them, when you hoped things would work out for them, when you sent them encouraging texts before big meetings, that energy was doing something real. The problem was, they started to see all of this as normal. Your sacrifice became their expectation. Your emergency response became their convenience. Your emotional labor became something they felt entitled to, not grateful for. Instead of recognizing what you brought to their life, they began to resent you for it. They started treating your kindness like weakness. They interpreted your loyalty as desperation. They convinced themselves that you needed them more than they needed you. And then they did something that was about to trigger the biggest mistake of their entire life. The betrayal came in whatever form hits the deepest. Maybe they spread lies about you to mutual friends, rewriting history to make you the villain in stories where you'd been nothing but supportive. Maybe they chose someone else over you, romantically, professionally, or socially, after you'd invested years building something together. Maybe they threw you under the bus publicly to save their own reputation. The timing was always brutal. They had this sick talent for kicking you when you were already down, when you were dealing with a family death, struggling with job loss, going through health problems, or facing financial stress. That's when they'd choose to deliver the final blow. They looked at you, this person who had been their constant support system, and decided you were the problem. They convinced themselves that removing you from their life would solve everything. They painted you as clingy, dramatic, toxic, or unstable to anyone who would listen. You tried to explain yourself, tried to salvage what you'd built together, tried to understand where it all went wrong. They made you feel crazy for expecting basic loyalty in return for years of dedication. They gaslighted you into thinking you were remembering things wrong, that you were overreacting, that you were the one being unreasonable. So you finally did what you should have done months or years earlier. You walked away. You stopped answering their crisis calls. You stopped lending money. You stopped making excuses for their behavior to concerned friends and family. You stopped showing up to events where they'd treat you like garbage in front of everyone else. You stopped caring what happened to them. And initially, they felt victorious. They actually celebrated getting rid of your negativity. They probably posted vague social media statuses about cutting toxic people out of your life and feeling so much lighter. They told people how much better they felt without your drama. Some of them even had the audacity to say things like, "I should have done this years ago," or "I don't know why I put up with that for so long." Meanwhile, you were going through the painful process of rebuilding your sense of reality. You weren't just grieving the relationship. You were grieving the version of yourself that had been willing to accept scraps in exchange for your whole heart. You were questioning everything: your judgment, your worth, your ability to read people correctly. You felt stupid for having believed in someone who could discard you so easily. You felt angry at yourself for not seeing the red flags that other people had pointed out. You felt embarrassed that you'd defended someone who had been talking badly about you behind your back. The healing process was messy and non-linear. Some days you missed them desperately. Other days you felt relieved to be free from the constant drama. Some nights you lay awake replaying conversations, trying to figure out where you went wrong. Other nights you slept peacefully for the first time in months. But while you were doing the hard work of healing and rebuilding, something absolutely devastating was beginning to unfold in their world. Within weeks of you leaving their life, things started going wrong for them in ways that seemed almost impossible to believe. Their car broke down with a repair bill that wiped out their savings. They got sick with something that lingered for weeks and affected their work performance. Their landlord raised the rent by an amount that stretched their budget past the breaking point. Their main source of income became unstable due to company restructuring. At first, you might have heard about these things through mutual friends and felt a little vindicated. "See? I always told them they needed to save money for emergencies." But this was just the beginning. Remember that new person they chose over you, the one they claimed was so much better for them, the one who understood them in ways you never could. That relationship became a nightmare that made your worst days together look like a fairy tale. If it was a romantic partner, they were cheating within months. If it was a friend, they were using them for money and connections. If it was a family member they'd sided with during conflict, that person turned manipulative and controlling once. They realized they had leverage. The new people in their life didn't have your patience, your forgiveness, or your genuine investment in their well-being. They took what they wanted and disappeared when things got difficult. They didn't offer the emotional support during crises that you'd provided for free. They didn't celebrate the small wins or remember the important dates. Their work life, which had been stable when you were around, became a source of constant stress. Projects they touched started failing. Their boss began questioning their judgment. Co-workers who used to collaborate with them started avoiding their assignments. The promotion they'd been expecting went to someone else. They found themselves having to work twice as hard for half the recognition they used to receive. Deals fell through at the last minute. Clients became difficult and demanding. Their professional reputation began suffering in ways they couldn't understand or explain. Hold that thought for a moment. I need your attention for something very important. For the first time, we're revealing everything we know about personal power, healing yourself and healing others. No filters, no holding back. We've been quietly adding all the occult secrets we've collected over literal years of spiritual practice. The techniques and wisdom that transformed us from controlled pawns into conscious creators are now available to those ready to walk the same path. This is your invitation to join Obsidian Inner Order and support our platform so we can continue growing our megaphone to reach other chosen ones waiting for activation. By joining the Obsidian Inner Order, you're not just gaining access to forbidden knowledge, You're becoming part of a movement that's rewriting reality itself. It's a 360 win for all of us. Link is in the description. Money became a constant source of anxiety. The side hustles that used to supplement their income dried up. Investments they'd been proud of started losing value. Unexpected expenses kept appearing. Medical bills, car repairs, technology replacements, home maintenance issues. They went from having a comfortable buffer to living paycheck to paycheck. Credit card debt started accumulating. They had to ask family members for loans, something that hurt their pride but became necessary for survival. Their physical health took a hit that concerned everyone around them. Chronic headaches that interfered with their ability to concentrate. Sleep problems that left them exhausted and irritable. Digestive issues that doctors couldn't quite pin down. Stress-related symptoms that medication couldn't fully address. Their mental health wasn't much better. Anxiety that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Depression that felt like a fog they couldn't shake. A constant feeling of being overwhelmed by responsibilities that used to feel manageable. But the strangest part, the part that really messed with their heads, was that nothing felt easy anymore. Simple tasks became complicated. Technology malfunctioned around them in ways that tech support couldn't explain. Traffic was always terrible when they needed to be somewhere important. Plans fell through for reasons beyond anyone's control. People were ruder to them without provocation. Even their luck with small things disappeared. They couldn't find parking spots. Their favorite restaurants were always closed when they wanted to go. Online orders got delayed or lost. Their phone calls went straight to voicemail even when people were available. Friends and family started commenting on how different they seemed. "You're so negative lately," people would say. "You seem angry all the time." "I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're exhausting to be around." People began distancing themselves without being able to articulate why. Invitations stopped coming. Group chats got quiet when they participated. Social gatherings felt awkward when they attended. They found themselves increasingly isolated, fighting battles on multiple fronts, exhausted by the constant effort required just to maintain basic stability. Everything that used to flow smoothly now required enormous energy for minimal results. Meanwhile, your life was transforming in ways that seemed almost miraculous by comparison. The healing process, while painful, was leading you toward a version of yourself you'd never been able to access while you were busy taking care of someone else. You started setting boundaries that actually meant something. You began recognizing red flags immediately instead of making excuses for them. Better opportunities started presenting themselves with perfect timing. The job interview that led to a position with better pay and work-life balance. The apartment that became available just when you needed to move. The new friendships with people who actually reciprocated your energy. You discovered interests and talents you'd forgotten about while you were focused on someone else's life. You remembered what it felt like to prioritize your own needs without feeling guilty. You learned to enjoy your own company without feeling lonely. People started commenting on how much happier you seemed. "You're glowing," they'd say. "You seem so much more confident. I love your energy lately." Your friends stopped walking on eggshells around you because you were no longer constantly stressed about someone else's drama. Success started flowing in areas where you'd previously struggled. Not because you suddenly became perfect, but because you had energy available for your own goals instead of constantly managing someone else's crises. The contrast became impossible to ignore, especially for mutual friends who watched both of your lives unfold simultaneously. After months or years of this pattern, them struggling while you thrived, something finally clicked in their brain. They started obsessing over the timing. When exactly did everything start going wrong? Right around the time you stopped speaking to them. When was the last time they felt truly supported, truly blessed, truly optimistic about their future? When you were actively involved in their life, they began remembering specific instances with painful clarity. How you'd encourage them before job interviews, and they'd somehow nail questions they hadn't prepared for. How your presence seemed to calm their anxiety during stressful periods. How good things always seemed to happen right after you'd told them you were proud of them or believed in them. The realization hit them like cold water to the face. You hadn't been holding them back. You had been holding them up. Your genuine care, your emotional investment, your positive intentions had been like a protective force field around their life. When you were there, they were shielded from the kind of systematic bad luck that was now destroying them. When you left, that protection went with you. This understanding triggered increasingly desperate attempts to reconnect with you. The late-night text messages that started casual, but quickly became emotional. "Hey, how have you been?" Followed by novels about how much they missed your friendship. Social media activity designed to get your attention. Liking old photos, watching all your stories immediately after you post them. They started showing up at places they knew you'd be, pretending it was coincidence. Oh my God, what are the chances? Acting surprised to see you at the coffee shop you'd been going to for years. Some of them tried to use mutual friends as messengers. They've been asking about you. They said they made a huge mistake. They're going through a really hard time right now. Attempting to manipulate your empathy, the same empathy they'd once taken advantage of. The most desperate ones even tried to recreate the circumstances that had originally brought you together, suddenly needing help with the same type of problems you'd once solved for them, having emergencies that required exactly the kind of support you used to provide. They started love-bombing you with attention they'd never given when you were actually available. Remembering your birthday for the first time in years, commenting on social media posts they would have ignored before, sending articles or memes that reminded them of you. But you'd changed. You'd learned to recognize manipulation tactics. You'd developed boundaries that couldn't be guilt-tripped away. You'd discovered your worth and refused to settle for less than you deserved. You could see their attempts for what they were. Not genuine remorse, but panic at losing their life support system. Not love, but dependency. Not appreciation for who you were, but desperation for what you'd provided. The truth about what had happened became undeniable. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. This was cause and effect, playing out in real time. You had been more than just a good friend, family member, or partner. You had been a source of blessing in their life that they'd completely taken for granted. Your prayers, your positive energy, your genuine investment in their well-being had been protecting them from forces they didn't even know existed. When they betrayed that trust, when they treated your love like it was worthless, when they convinced themselves they could do better without you, they cut themselves off from something irreplaceable. God had placed you in their life as both a gift and a test. Would they recognize the value of genuine love? Would they treat his chosen one with the respect and appreciation you deserved? Would they understand that your presence was a privilege, not a given? They failed that test spectacularly, and now they were living with the natural consequences of rejecting a blessing they hadn't been wise enough to recognize. Their current struggles weren't punishment in the vindictive sense. They were the inevitable result of cutting themselves off from a source of protection and positive energy they'd never learned to appreciate. The most telling part of their downfall was how specific it became. It wasn't just general bad luck. It was like the universe was systematically removing every advantage they'd taken for granted while you were in their life. The networking connections they'd made through you stopped returning their calls. The opportunities that had come through your encouragement and support dried up completely. Even their confidence, which had been built on your constant validation and belief in them, crumbled without your foundation. They started reaching out to old mutual friends, fishing for information about you, desperately trying to understand what had changed. Some of these friends who had witnessed the way they treated you were less than sympathetic. You had someone who really cared about you, and you threw it away. Became a common response that stung more each time they heard it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew both of you. While they were spiraling into chaos, you were building something beautiful and stable. While they were begging for help from people who barely knew them, you were surrounded by genuine support from people who valued you. While they were struggling to pay bills, you were finally able to save money because you weren't constantly bailing someone else out. If this story resonates with you, if you recognize yourself as the person who gave everything and got betrayal, in return, I need you to understand something crucial. You were never the problem. You were the solution they couldn't appreciate. You were the blessing they threw away because they didn't understand its value. Their current difficulties aren't something to celebrate. That's not who you are. But they are confirmation that your love, your loyalty, your genuine heart were more valuable than they ever realized. They prove that you weren't asking for too much when you expected basic respect and reciprocity. You don't need their apology to validate your worth. You don't need them to acknowledge their mistake to prove you were right. Their circumstances are speaking louder than any words ever could. What you need to do now is protect the gift you are. Trust your instincts completely. Set boundaries that honor your value. Never let anyone convince you that your genuine heart is too much, because the right people will recognize it as exactly what they've been looking for. You are a chosen one. Your presence in someone's life is a blessing, not a burden. And anyone who's meant to be in your life will treat you accordingly from the very beginning. The people who betrayed you taught you something invaluable about your own worth. They showed you what happens when someone takes a gift from God for granted. They proved that your love and support aren't rights to be claimed, but privileges to be earned and maintained. So guard that gift carefully, share it with people who deserve it, and never, ever let anyone convince you that you're ordinary, because everything about your story proves you're anything but. Your next chapter is going to be written with people who understand your value from day one, and that's exactly what you deserve.